Welcome back or welcome to my channel. My name is Taylor and happy Bookmas Day 12. We have reached the end of Bookmas, which means we're doing my top 10 reads of 2025. Now, I am filming this on December 22nd, so we have another week left to accomplish some more reading and reading goals. I mean, I've already surpassed my reading goal by over 20 since my reading goal was 50, and now I'm in the 70s. But I don't know what the odds are that I'm going to read a new, God tier favorite book of the year between now and the end of December. It really just depends on what books I decide to pick up between now and then. And I just haven't read anything in the past few days, so I may just be in a end of the year lull situation. But I have my top 10 reads of the year as well as 3 honorable mentions to go through. I'm probably just going to rapid fire the honorable mentions, just because I've kind of talked about most of these books all year round ad nauseum. So, there's only one book that's kind of new to the list that you may have heard me talk about in my end of year book tag that we'll get a little more in depth into. But yeah, all of my top 10 were 5 stars this year. I think I ended up with 15 5 stars for this, but one of those is from most of those are from a singular series. So we'll get into that. But yeah, I guess without further ado, let's hop into, first off, the honorable mentions. So for my 3 honorable mention, all of these were 4.75 stars, could be going into the 5-star territory. First off, New Adult by Timothy Janosky. This was a surprising read considering I had soft DNF'd it twice, but once I got after those first 2 chapters, it really grabbed me. It's a new adult contemporary romance queer retelling of 13 Going on 30 following Nolan Baker, who's trying to get his comedy career off the ground, but when he wishes on some crystals after a failed attempt at attending his sister's wedding, he wakes up at the age of 30 with a flourishing career, but a terrible personal life. And then the next honorable mention is Deathless Divide by Justina Ireland. This is the second in the Dread Nation duology, which follows Jane McKean. In this world, the zombie apocalypse started during the American Civil War, and now we're about 15 to 20 years later, following the daughters of formerly enslaved individuals who are being trained to be attendants, which fight off zombies and defend rich white people. And of course, I always say this is a duology told in 4 parts, and just go in understanding each thing might be whiplash, and also pretty much every character in here is a little gay. Then my third and final honorable mention is Ignite Me, which is the 3rd book in the Shatter Me series. In this series, you're following Juliet, whose touch is deadly, but after being rescued from prison to essentially become the dystopian reestablishment regime's torture device, she decides that she's going another way, and there also is a love triangle in here, but you kind of know after book 2 where it's going. Or if you've been anywhere on Book Talk, you know who's the clear winner. And I'm just gonna say this was the first series where a novella really made me change my mind. And this book, lovely. I will say the writing and sort of the age/spice level does kind of increase as you go throughout the first 3 books. So just understand, the first book very much so could be middle school, early YA, but it does get a little bit more adult as you go on. So those are all my honorable mentions. Let's hop into my top 10 reads of this year. So these are in no particular order from 10 to 1. These are just sort of the top 10 books that I really enjoyed. I know probably what my number 1 read of the year is, but everything else kind of falls within that top 10 mark. So first up, we have The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This is the first book in a trilogy, and we are following Ren. She is a war orphan living in Nicara, and in order to save herself from being sold off to a dirty old man who just kind of needs a wife, she decides that she's going to test into the highest ranking military academy in Nicara, Senegal. And when she does arrive there on her first day, she is kind of treated poorly because she doesn't fit the upper class, very much so different accent, different skin color group of people that is there. But during her time at Senegal, she starts to discover things about the magical world around them, as well as war starts to break out. And I will just say this book really is interesting. The writing is immaculate. As someone who works in academia, I think R.F. Kuang and I just really click on the very much so academic focus of her stories. Granted, I've only read 1 book, but also the characters that you look at throughout the story, even though you're pretty much only stuck in Ren's POV, it just makes you, like, there's no character that you love and hate. Like, there's always a gray area when discussing the characters, and, like, your feelings around them are complicated, particularly around our lead with Ren, and I'm excited to see where the Dragon Republic takes us. Then we have my most recent 5-star read and my favorite holiday book, holiday romance of the season, and that is Good Spirits by B.K. Borison. This is a holiday romance slash kind of like paranormal romance, romantasy. It does follow the Ghost of Christmas Past, so however you want to look at that. But we are following Harriet and Nolan. Harriet is very much so a people-pleasing kind of quiet Christmas mouse who is dealing with the backlash of deciding to choose herself versus what her family wanted for her. And one night when she comes home, she realizes there's a strange man in her house, and that just happens to be a ghost of Christmas past, aka Nolan. And he's a grumpy ghost who's been living 100 years waiting to move on into a better afterlife. But when he gets stuck haunting Harriet, he's trying to figure out what about her deserves a reckoning or a haunting. And let's just say their story is very cute, very heartwarming. It's a very much so it's an always been you situation. And yeah, plus pretty sprayed edges. B.K. Borison never lets me down, and there's a reason that this is a lot of people's favorite holiday romance this season, and I'm so excited to see the next one in the series, Grim Tidings, coming out next year, which I did talk about on Bookmas Day 10 during my most anticipated releases for 2026. Then we have another entry from B.K. Borison, Business Casual. This is the final book in the Love Light Farm series. Every book in that series is a series of interconnected standalones set in specific seasons. This one is particularly set in the fall season, and we're following Charlie and Nova. Charlie is the half-brother to Stella from book 1, and he's been visiting town more and more often as he is starting to cut ties with their, not so great father. And while he's in town, he is helping out Nova, which is Beckett's sister from book 2, who is a tattoo artist trying to open her own business. So as they're working together and growing their friendship, Nova and Charlie start to form a little friends with benefits connection that eventually leads to more. Only thing is that Nova wants to keep it hidden from the rest of the town, which leads to lots of fun things after that. And Charlie just wants to be the one chosen. That's all he wants. If you don't like friends with benefits, this is probably not for you, just because while the relationship starts out with that friendship and that connection, it is a relationship that kind of builds as the intimacy ramps up. So if you don't like the spice, this one might not be for you. But yeah, I love me Charlie. And let me just say, Nova is a tattoo artist, but for some reason, if you put a tattoo artist or a tattooed hero or heroine or anyone in between in a story, I will just be guaranteed to love them. Then we have what I think is my number one read of the year / my number one romance read of the year, and that is Only for the Week by Natasha Bishop. This is another sort of friends with benefits, casual relationship turned more situation. So in this one, you're following Janelle and Rome. Janelle's sister is marrying her ex, although Janelle couldn't give a damn, even though her family really thinks that she is still hung up on him. So when they decide to go to their destination wedding Tulum a little bit early, Janelle is looking for some fun, and the best man, Rome, has really been into Janelle for quite some time. So Janelle agrees to an Only for the Week, no strings attached situation sip, and of course Rome convinces her otherwise. And there's lots of harder topics discussed in here, but it is a spicy, steamy read with a romance that just has me swooning. And I can't really say that there's a third act breakup, although I'm not saying there isn't some sort of conflict situation here. But definitely this is my number one romance read of the year. It's probably my number one read overall for the year. So yeah. And also, we've been waiting the sequel to this forever, and it's coming out next year as far as I'm concerned. So then we have a YA romance, and that is 12th Night by Alexine Farrow-Fallmuth. If you're familiar with Olivia Blake is her pen name, which she writes her adult romantasy and romances under. This is her real name, which she writes her YA romances under, although I think she only has 2 YA romances out, and this is the first one that I have read by her. And obviously this is a retelling of Shakespeare's 12th Night, but I've never read that and not particularly familiar with the story, so I can't comment on how much of it is like, one for one. But in the story, we're following Viola Reyes and Jack Orsino. Jack is the president, star quarterback of the high school, and V is the VP who's constantly having to take on everything for everyone because she's the overachiever, reliable, responsible student who might have a little bite back. in her. And Jack and V just don't seem to see eye and eye. But when Jack enters himself on the football field, he enters into the online world of Twelfth Night and strikes up a friendship with Caesarea, which is V's online male persona. And while they're striking up a hidden friendship online, V and Jack are starting to strike up an actual romance and friendship in real life. And of course, lots of things ensue from there. I really love the discussion of how women and fandoms are perceived in this story, and how women, engaging in, I guess, traditionally male-dominated, like, fandom spaces like Dungeons and Dragons and, like, sci-fi and stuff like that often kind of get looked down upon, or, like, how would I say, fetishized and stuff like that. And V over here, she takes no shit, and I love that. And the relationship was just very, very cute, in my opinion, from how it grew. Then we have another YA romance. This is a YA queer graphic novel following Hispanic teen Cade Munez, who is spending the summer helping his stepdad out on his stepdad's former general's ranch. And while he's there, Cade strikes up a friendship, which leads to a relationship with the ranch owner / general's son. And also, he's trying to figure out if all of these spooky happenings and, gossip around town about what happened to his new boyfriend, secret boyfriend's mother, is true or not. So yeah, this tackles a lot of hard topics, particularly about being a queer teen in, like, the deep red South, and how that goes on, particularly with very strict conservative parents, like, what is the other guy's name? Henry, like Henry has. So yeah, this one took me by surprise. I'm just going to say the ending made it what it is, because within that last, like, 10%, I was both ready to cry, laugh, scream, and chuck this across the room. So if that says anything about the book, I mean, I think that's a resounding endorsement. Then we have a YA fantasy read, Zodiac Rising by Katie Zhao. This story captures everything I love about a YA fantasy. The things that brought me into, like, Rick Riordan's fantasy world when I was a kid really brought me into this one. We have a cast of multiple characters, multiple POVs, all of them having storylines that contribute to the story, a found family, and then there's it's everything that I want in a YA fantasy is what I was giving, and then the ending of this was so good. I find it a little bit hard to describe this story, but essentially you're following 4 different characters, 3 who are mortal beings who have been cursed to be their particular creature self. 1 is a vampire, 1 is a fox spirit, and 1 is a werewolf, and 1 is a human with a secret that we are discovering throughout the story. And after Evangeline's brother disappears overnight, in order to secure her place in power at the head of the council, Evangeline decides to go on this quest / heist to rescue their statues from the Fae underworld. And of course, lots of craziness ensues from there. And I'm just excited to see how this story continues. I bought the sequel recently because the ending of this one had me. There's a particular character who appears in the ending of this that makes you go, why? Why? I don't know. So now, after the ending of this, all of our characters are in much different places. So I'm interested to see where she takes us in book 2. And I think this is going to be a trilogy. If I'm correct, at least it makes sense in my mind to be a trilogy. So yeah, if you want just classic, solid, like the epitome of, like, what a YA fantasy should be, this one's for you. Then, of course, I read The Hunger Games this year, and while technically all of The Hunger Games, the entire Hunger Games I consider a 5-star series. For me, my favorite book in the series goes to book 1. And in terms, I haven't read Sunrise on the Reaping. We will be reading that in the new year when it comes out in paperback. And The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I didn't foresee it being a 5-star, and it definitely wasn't a 5-star. But if you don't know anything about The Hunger Games, we are following Katniss Everdeen. She lives in District 12. She lives in the country of Panem, which is essentially a very distant, like, dystopian North America, where everyone is ruled by the capital, and there are 12 districts, not including District 13, which was destroyed in the Rebellion War. And in order to repay the capital for all the losses that happened during the rebellion, each year 2 kids aged 12 to 18 from each district gets reaped in the Hunger Games and must be sent to fight to the death in the capital for everyone's viewing pleasure. And when Katniss's sister Primrose gets called, Katniss volunteers as tribute and enters the Hunger Games with Peeta, who's also from District 12, and they start to shake everything up. But the original book it's a very concise story, is what I like about it. You are simply following from beginning to the end, her getting taken into the Hunger Games, her getting ready, and her competing, and her, finishing out the Hunger Games. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that she wins it. I feel like most everyone can assume that. But yeah, this is a very concise story, whereas we get to go so many other places with Catching Fire and Mockingjay, just like in terms of like, if you just read this first story, like you wouldn't, like it's a solid first book. Like a lot of first books fall prey to world building and not being able to stand on their own, whereas this first book could stand on its own, even though I recommend reading all the other books. These last two books I don't own physically, but they are both romances and they both are the conclusion to their specific series. So first up is Love Arranged by Lauren Asher. This story is following Lily and Lorenzo. They strike up an online relationship unbeknownst to them on a dating app, or a dating app that allows people to remain anonymous. But after a poor in-person meetup, we're following them months later when Lorenzo's in need of a fake engagement in order to improve his standing and image in the polls, and Lily is in need of him to win because she absolutely dislikes the other guy and needs to help save her family business. So she agrees to be his fake date and later fake fiance, and through their relationship they start to learn more about each other and start to learn how to love each other even when they're at their darkest and when they're at their happiest, and it's so sweet. There's a lot going on in this story, particularly on the part of Lorenzo. He does have OCD and he does have a strong past with having lost his parents to a drunk driver many years ago. And yeah, so he's got a lot of trauma that he needs to work through. So there's a lot of heaviness to the story, but there's a lot of happiness to be found when you look through it. So yeah, you have a grumpy sunshine / the grump kind of bringing the sunshine back situation. And yeah, I thought it was a good conclusion to the story. Then the last book that is on my top 10 for the year is Rewind It Back by Liz Tomforte. In this book, this is the final book in the Windy City series, and it is a second chance romance, childhood friends to lovers / It's Always Been You between Hallie and Rio. Rio is the fun-loving sunshine character that we've been following throughout all the books, who just can't seem to, get past that first date. Unbeknownst to his friends, he's been hung up on his childhood love, Hallie, for many years. The only problem is they broke up about 6 or 7 years ago, right before he moved to Chicago. But when Hallie rolls up and becomes not only his next door neighbor, but also the interior designer for his house, they are forced to work together and rehash everything that went wrong and everything that went right, during their original run. And of course, lots of things are said, and it's just like, Rio's my favorite character from the Windy City series, and while his book isn't my favorite, Rio DeLuca, you will always be my favorite character. You will always be my favorite character. He just is. He just is. I honestly thought, here's my thing. I had it. Everything that Liz put into this book is everything that I thought I would get storyline-wise. So I don't know if she just read my mind and then just put that on page, but hey. I will say there are some hard topics in this book discussed, such as cheating, not on part of the two main characters, but also like dealing with the loss of parents and sick parents and stuff like that. So if you're not ready to handle those situations, do keep that in mind. And also, the great thing about this one, even though it's a second chance romance, there's no third act breakup, at least not in the present. So yeah, but those are my top 10 reads for 2025. We have officially come to the end of Bookmas, and the next video you will be seeing from me will be my January TBR. So yeah, it's interesting to see my run. I did much better at Bookmas this year. We only missed one video. And I was able to at least hopefully get everything edited and up on time. So yeah, let me know what your favorite books or favorite reads for the year of 2025 are. What are you most excited to go into the new year and reading? And what are we setting all of our reading goals at for the new year? And I will see y'all, I guess, next year.